Welcome to the To The Point podcast. Now here's your host for To The Point, John Brake.
All right, you're watching and listening to Season 1, Episode 3 of To The Point from Life Point. I'm John, and this is my beautiful wife, Olivia.
Hey, I'm Kelly, and this is my wonderful, beautiful, fantastic, I had to outdo John, wife.
Not cool.
Bridget. And we have special guests with us today from Fredericktown, Missouri. Pastors Aaron and Cori Proffer, very good friends of mine and ours, and found some of the founding pastors. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, of the Rekindle Marriage Conference, which you guys just had last week?
Yeah, last week.
So,
and I don't know how to introduce my wife after you guys just said all of that kind of stuff about your wives. So
all that and more.
For those of you who are following the vlog, you can just see how out of my league I am. So
there you go.
There's the introduction.
That's a pretty good intro.
That worked. I think that topped the
Man,
both of us.
he did both of us, John.
Can we start it? Can we do that again?
Yeah.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about keys to a successful marriage, keys to a happy marriage. Aaron, you spoke for our church this morning, and it was awesome, really impactful, and I think that it will make a difference in a lot of the marriages in our. I know that it'll help us just to know that there's some people dealing with the same stuff. It's always good to know that no matter. We've been married for almost 9 years. I don't remember. You mentioned 13 years?
Almost 13, yeah.
And you guys 19?
Almost 19.
Almost 19.
So it's like we're all sort of in different stages of that, which is really cool to be able to kind of talk at different stages along the way, because I know you guys will help us. I know sometimes in a marriage it can feel like we're the only ones who have gone through this, whatever situation that might be, or whatever discussion or whatever fight or whatever. I know it's easy to feel that way. So getting to talk with people that are in different stages of that is going to be super helpful for me. So I don't know where a good place would be to start, but I think maybe Aaron, to put you on the spot, just because you've kind of co-founded and are a big part of this marriage conference, and you spoke today and kind of mentioned some of these keys, maybe you want to kick us off with just what you think are some of the most important things to really keep the marriage covenant intact.
So first off, probably the best advice that I could ever give someone is that marriage is not like riding a bike. You know, it's not like you can learn it one time and then have it the rest of your life.
And there are no training wheels.
There's no training wheels and lots of wrecks.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but seriously, marriage takes work, and that's it. It takes work, continuous work. But it is the most rewarding thing that you can do in your life. So
right. And do you think that that continuous investment from both people? I know that at different times, there can be it feel like one or the other is kind of given a little more or given a little less or whatever. But how would you think that is a good way for us to keep both parties invested as we go through life, to make sure that we're both kind of putting in the same amount of work or doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Everyone is different, right? So there's times where I feel like our marriage is going great, and Courtney may feel like, hey, we need a lot of work, right? And so we see things differently. We perceive things differently. And I think we all have to have this mindset that marriage, when the Bible says that the two become one, that you are working together as a team. And for you to really be a team, you have to think of the other person before you think of yourself.
Right. That's good.
And so when you feel like, our marriage needs a little work, then you should be the one to start putting the other person before you put yourself. I've never in our life, in our marriage, almost 13 years, we've never gone through a time where if I felt like I needed something and I didn't give it to her, that she didn't reciprocate that back.
Yeah.
So we kind of have this ongoing joke that, if we need something personally, we do that specific thing for each other, right? And so we'll be sitting at home on the couch, and I'm one of those people, 5 love languages, physical touch, Second would be physical touch. Third would be physical touch.
Right. And then maybe some others in there after.
Yeah. Way down the list.
Eventually you get to physical touch.
Somewhere in there.
Down, physical touch.
But if we're like laying on the couch and she gives like the best back rubs or whatever, she knows now that if I am giving her a back rub, it's probably because I want a back rub, right? And there's times where I'm like, no. I really mean to give you this back rub,
right.
But that's kind of how
preface it.
Exactly.
Like, hey, this is not for me. This
is for you. So that's how marriage is, though. Like, if you feel like you're lacking something, to just start giving, start serving.
Yeah.
Because just like we kind of talked about today, that, when the Bible says to love your neighbor as yourself, your spouse is not your neighbor. They are a part of you.
You are one. Yeah.
You are one. And so basically when you love your spouse, you are loving yourself.
Right.
You're investing into that.
And when you're not, there's that lack there, or there's that feeling of protection, like I need to make sure I'm covered or whatever. But what you don't realize is that when you lay yourself down and she or he, they lay themselves down, all needs are met across the board. Everybody's sacrificially kind of giving unto each, to each other. And it just creates strength, and it creates this process that that the other's fully invested, the other's fully trusting. You're able to just connect on that level and understand that it's not about protecting or amplifying what I need, but I get what I need through what they need.
That's right. That's right.
There's kind of a joke on staff that almost every conversation we end up having, I turn somehow back to football or the outdoors.
Yeah, fish.
Yeah, fish.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think that's why I love you, Kelly.
I'm learning all about it because I don't know anything about any of that stuff. We talked about that this morning.
Yeah.
You talked about the importance of, kind of seeing things as being on a team. When I was playing football here and I was in junior high all the way through 10th grade, I think we lost like one game. And then we won 3 games junior and senior year combined. And, what happened? Well, we had 7 guys get scholarships that played football on that team. What happened? I'll tell you what I think happened was there was an overall lack of trust. I mean, there was a coaching switch, but we lost some trust in each other because of just things that happened and differences that were in life. And so I think what you saw is more people on that team playing for themselves rather than playing for the whole team to win. I mean, just times when people weren't throwing blocks for somebody else that they could have, which we did before. And there is something about that sacrifice that's necessary for success in sports. I think it absolutely translates itself into so many other avenues and veins of life, but particularly when it comes to marriage.
And one thing that I think about is a lot of times we get married because that person makes us happy. And some advice or something I read somewhere said, you're ready to get married when you're ready to make that person happy.
Right.
Now, you're not always going to make that person happy, but that's
a shift.
The sacrifice of marriage is I'm going into this thing not because you make me happy, but because of how I can serve you. Mm-hmm. And that's really to let you know when you are ready to get married.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I don't remember the name of the book, but I posted this Tim Keller quote on the Life Point Instagram last week. Whether we are husband or wife, we are not to live for ourselves, but for the other. And that is the hardest yet single most important function of being a husband or a wife in marriage, to be able to learn that. I wish I could remember the name of that book, because I'm sure I've not read the book. I think it's an awesome quote, but I think that book would be, have you guys heard of, he's got this book that he wrote with his wife that is just full of wisdom, and now I want to actually read the book so I can be like, yeah, I'll read that book.
Well, I think some realness of marriage, like Kelly usually just takes his clothes off and they don't make it into the hamper, right? And this is true for a lot of men.
Where are we going with this?
Yeah.
We just got real.
I'm skipping my head.
That was going to be point down the list.
That's change the rating.
Yeah, change the rating of the podcast.
I feel like Kelly's love language is physical touch as well.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm a woman. I was not going there at all with this.
That's the only place we are.
Yeah.
But I used to get so aggravated, and I would pick up his clothes with hostility and take him to the hamper and shove him in there. Like, why can't he pick up his own clothes? I can't believe this. This is so stupid. He's how old, And finally, I realized like that just made me really unhappy when I had that kind of hostility towards his clothes on the floor. And when I can't remember, I'm sure it was through sermons and prayer and probably reading that God started to change my heart and said, instead of seeing that as I have to pick up his clothes because he's left them on the floor, and changed it to I get to do this for my husband because he is challenged in this area, obviously. But I get to do this for him as my way of, because of all the other things he does for our family, this is one thing I can do for him. When I changed my attitude towards his clothes on the floor, it made a huge difference in our relationship, because now I didn't feel like I had to because he was purposely leaving there for me to pick them up, but because I wanted to.
Right.
And I became a servant to him in that area.
And most of the time, even if you don't talk about that specific thing, the tension and the resentment and the feeling and the attitudes of that just kind of seep out into other areas of your relationship. And even if you never deal with that, and Kelly never knows that that's a problem that needs to be fixed or whatever, it's impacting all of this stuff. It's just your relationship as a whole. And when you are able to change your outlook on that, and even if you were to bring, I don't know the status on you putting your clothes in the hamper, but even if it's
a little better.
It's a little better.
But if you bring that to your spouse with the right heart, there's way more, a bigger opportunity or a bigger chance that they'll listen to that and that there'll be some growth.
And it's knowing each other. Like now I just know the way he thinks about things is I'll do that later. And he is going to get to it later. Later may be 5 days later, but he has every intention of getting back to it later. He's not leaving it there so that I'll come do it.
Right.
He's thinking about what the next thing he's doing. And so it's been good for us because, I mean, we still have the struggle of he's a very creative thinker. I'm a very realistic, logical, here's each step. And then he's off dreaming and thinking about all these things. But it's a beautiful picture of why we're a good team.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the day-to-day things can be really aggravating. But that's what's cool about now that we're almost 19 years down the road. It's like, okay, but I love these things about him. And it brings the fun and adventure because he is a dreamer.
Right.
And, I'll be like, it's bedtime. And then he starts a tickle war with everybody.
Yeah.
And it's fun. But I'm like, no, it's bedtime. Like, it's just bedtime. Go to bed. And so I love the aspect that each of us bring to the team. But that means I have to pick up underwear sometimes.
Sometimes every day.
You're welcome.
No big deal. It's all the time.
The sacrifice part of marriage in Ephesians 5:25, there's a passage that basically says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church and gave himself up for the church. So the sacrifice part of marriage is, he is saying, hey, I gave up everything for the church. And so I started to think about that a few days ago because I've been in church my entire life. I always tell everybody, my parents had a drug problem. They drugged me to church every night of the week. Every time, right, Kelly?
Right, yeah.
Every time that the doors were open, I was at church. And
our parents were dealers, actually.
it's exactly right. But the reality is, church is not all fun. And there's hurt at church. Yeah. There is a side of church that a lot of people may not see. There's feelings that get hurt at church. There's relationships that get broken at church. And, we always, our goal is to point people towards Jesus, but when you're dealing with people, there's going to be issues. Mm-hmm. And so growing up, I had seen my parents give and give and give and be there in the middle of the night for people, and then those people may turn around and walk out of their life.
Right.
And so I didn't want to have anything to do with the church growing up. I definitely didn't want to be standing behind a pulpit and ministering in a church. And so taking that into context, Christ still to this day would give himself up for the broken church.
Right.
The church that doesn't have it all together, the church that doesn't have the best volunteer team, and the church that has staff that calls out on crazy days, and the church that has relational issues going on.
Right.
He would still give himself up sacrificially for the church. And I think that's what we are supposed to do in marriage, that even when things aren't going great, you still sacrifice.
Right.
When Kelly still has dirty underwear on the floor, you still sacrifice. So
Absolutely.
I'm really sorry I brought the underwear in.
That's okay. It'll just be the ongoing theme throughout the entire podcast.
Raw and real.
it's the raw and real.
I think another one of the key things when you talk about a key to marriage is having the right expectations.
Oh, yeah. That's a big deal.
I mean, I think everybody, I don't care who you are, I don't care how much premarital counseling you do, and I've done hundreds, even thousands of hours of premarital counseling with people. There is no way you can set yourself up to have the accurate expectation of the way things are going to be.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
So I want to ask a question of the ladies to kind of just, what were some of your expectations for your marriage that you had to let the Lord adjust? Apparently, Bridget
Our
was
whole
about
first year.
underwear. Oh, our first year was brutal. It was. We didn't even make it through the honeymoon without having a big fight.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I had too high of expectations. I thought when you got married, like the husband just took out the trash and, just did things the way you wanted them to do things. I thought you would do the dishes right. He did do the dishes.
I did do
he
the
just
dishes.
didn't do it the way I thought he should do it. And so it really became this heavy burden for our marriage of my expectations were completely out of line, definitely. And I think once I finally realized, I think older, wiser women would say, he's doing dishes. Just go out of the kitchen and let him do the dishes. Don't say anything.
No joke. I think it was maybe 5 years before I ever did the dishes again.
Yeah, it was a while.
Yeah.
But so for us, definitely expectations, and it's then being in ministry, and Kelly always gets big ideas, and they scared me. And I always thought, why don't you just do it like everybody else? Why do we have to go change everything and make everything different? I'm okay with just staying in my lane and keeping it nice and tidy, and Kelly's not. He likes to
building highways.
He likes to find his own lane and shake it up for sure. And that was scary to me. And so that was another thing we kind of had to work through in our marriage was, but it built so much trust going through those seasons and coming out on the other side and saying, I totally trust you. Now when he gets a crazy idea, I may still be like, okay, let's think about it, but I'm much more willing to go there with him.
I would say for me, I'm kind of maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum. I don't know if I had my expectations set high enough. Mm-hmm.
Well, that made me sound really good. Wow. Hold on. Let her talk. I'm sure she's going to clarify because I know it wasn't.
There's never been underwear on the floor of the Proffer house.
No, I can fully relate to Bridget. But it's not on the floor. It's hanging halfway on the clothes hanger. I'm like, seriously?
Hold on, there's a process to this. So
I get you.
Underwear go in the hamper, but if a pair of shorts or jeans aren't dirty yet,
yes,
they're half dirty.
Yes,
they're half in the hamper, right? They're just half.
I put them halfway in.
Mine are I have clothes stations in my bedroom. I have 4 or 5 places.
Oh my goodness, this is
that is
so
exactly the way it works.
If I'm going to reuse that, cool. If I'm not sure, we'll figure it out later over here. And then the hamper is sort of whatever happens over there. Just sort of near the hamper, I'm good.
And this podcast is brought to you by Tide.
Tide Pods, Johnson Youth Pastor.
Yeah. We're not doing the Tide Pod challenge. No way.
So I'm curious. I'll get us back on track. What did you mean by these lower expectations?
I don't know if I really. We started dating when I was just turned 17 years old, so still very much a kid. So I don't even think I fully realized what marriage was even really about. And our first year of marriage as well, it was terrible, absolutely
First
terrible.
month was awesome, right? First month.
You said month.
She can't really remember it.
Okay, well,
I'm just saying.
Okay, let me clarify.
I'll be the
It
future
could have
police. You
been
said
just a
months.
month. I want to make sure I get that right.
I don't even think it was a month.
Okay.
I'm glad you remember it that way.
Yeah.
But just over the years, like, it's just really, like, amazed me, like, how opposites attract and just the strengths that each person can bring into a marriage. His family is, we talked about this just over last week, like complete opposite of mine. Mine is everybody's all up in everybody's business, everybody knows everything. And his, is more, what would you say? How do you phrase this?
Okay, so
how do you want it to be phrased?
my family, how we were raised is you're there for each other no matter what.
Yeah.
But you let people go and make the decisions they need to make, and you don't dig your nose into everyone else's business. And that's the way that I perceive it. But her family is like, we care, and so we ask, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to bridge those two, which both of them have great attributes and pros, but when we would go through a relational thing, I'm just, giving her space, and she's like asking me all the questions and trying to figure out how we work through those type of things. That was difficult. That was very, and still can be difficult.
And it kind of goes into the church setting as well. And I feel like those two strengths have brought us closer as a team to where, I can be a little bit more perceptive sometimes and be like, I think what you just said probably hurt their feelings. Like, we need to go to them and make sure that they're okay. And it would be something that he would, just kind of sweep under the rug and be like, oh, no, it's fine. But on the flip side, I don't know, like, he's just made me into just a better person overall, really.
Wow.
That's very
Mic drop.
good.
Well
Need a
done.
mic drop right
Aaron.
there.
You're making us look better.
But I feel like I've helped you out.
Clearly.
You've helped him help you, right?
Yeah.
Is that how that
Yeah.
works? It's
Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Completely agree with that, though. Like, he there's not a confrontation he won't go to, and I'm definitely used to very much be passive aggressive. Like, just, I'm not going to deal with it. And I feel like it's been good for both of us. I've probably said, you probably don't need to worry about that confrontation. But then there's definitely times he still goes headlong into it because he knows it's the right thing to do. And it usually does keep a bigger problem from happening. But I've learned to also handle confrontation much quicker because honestly it is easier. The sooner you can handle conflict, the better it is. And so I've said the same thing about him. I feel like he has made me a better person, a stronger person for sure. Yeah. So and then I'm sure I've helped you out too.
Bridget is my brakes, and that's a good thing. It's a great thing to have brakes, because
we have 3.
True.
Technically there's 5 brakes. I
There's
think.
5 total.
But I mean, I am a dreamer and a vision guy, and I like to hard charge into the future, and I'm one of those. I think that we can do anything. And Bridget helps me slow down sometimes, and that's a powerful thing that I need. So
I don't know if there's been anything more useful in ministry in a church beside a wife coming in and says, "Hey, you need to slow down."
Yeah.
I mean, you've been at the church 70 hours a week. You're doing this. You're taking care of everyone else's problems. You need to slow down. Let's take some time for the family. And when you get that, sometimes you don't want to agree to that because, like you said, we're going as fast as we can, moving in a direction. However, man, sometimes taking that rest or slowing down is some of the best things that you can do because you can see from a bigger distance and put your family where God wants your family, and that is right after your marriage. It's God, wife, kids.
Absolutely.
Learning that priority that's a big deal. That's something even with our kids being little that we're trying to kind of instill in them, that they're sort of like this there's that priority list already built into it. We're going to focus on our faith. We're going to focus on church and things surrounding our faith. And then I'm going to focus on your mom. She's going to focus on me. And then, hey, you guys come in third.
Yeah, third.
There you go. Yeah. And they're like, what? My son is a sore loser. So he hates, I can't believe God would be more important than me.
Absolutely. Every time. Yeah.
I heard somebody else say, though, that if you put your kids higher in that priority list, then they're really not in the long run.
Yeah.
They fall way further down the list because of the hurt and the things that'll happen if you get that priority list out of order. So
I think you said something about that this morning when you were preaching about that your wife is before your kids. And I mean, we all love our kids. We all have great kids and they're fun, but man, it's so amazing for your kids to see a mom and dad that love each other. It provides stability.
Yeah.
And a foundation, and I don't think you can teach your kids truly about God unless you're really working on that marriage. I mean, that is where your kids are going to learn about how to love and respect somebody.
I really think that, not to go into the realm of politics at all, because this isn't a political statement. I think this is a statement about the condition of our national soul, is that the reason why we see so many crazy things happening in our communities and in our culture is because I really think it can be boiled down to the disintegration of the family, starting with the marital unit, and that one thing, that Ephesians 5 is so powerful, submit one to another. That's verse 21 in that chapter. Whenever you see marriages where the couple has practiced this over time, you tend to also see strong, well-adjusted kids. Mm-hmm. You tend to see more financial stability. You tend to see less depression and some of those other aspects of mental illness that exist out there because this is what we're designed for. This is part of God's plan for us. Is to keep those things in order. And when you can love God by loving your spouse in that fashion, it's a complete game changer.
Oh yeah.
And it's I don't know if you've read the book Weird by Craig Rochelle, but it just talks about how we are set apart. We're called to be different than the world. And what does the world do? Their marriages are failing left and right. The divorce rate is so high. And so I truly feel like our marriages are such a witness tool.
Right.
That
Absolutely.
We don't even realize what an impact that can be on people because, just like the way that you treat me in training Mason, to be that way. You don't hardly see that anymore. You don't see honor. You don't see respect. You don't see men hardly even opening a door for a woman anymore. Mm-hmm. And so to go so far above and beyond that, it really opens up a door to, be weird in today's society.
Yeah. Weird in their best ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Olivia, I didn't give you a chance to answer the question about expectations.
I don't think that Olivia would like to answer this question. I think it boils down to that I've never met any single one of them. I think that's how that works.
That's funny.
Yeah. But you guys are new in ministry as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Raising 3 kids, and 9 years is not a blink.
Right.
That's substantial marriage.
That's right.
So what maybe was there any expectations that you had about what the way things would be that made you, maybe you had to go, whoa, what's different here?
Anything you want to throw out there? It's okay.
I don't think so.
Well, I can kind of talk a little bit about some of the just together that we had to kind of figure out as we walked through more things and figured out stuff. It's just like an expectation to understand, for arguing, we were talking about reconciling or resolving issues within the marriage. I think that we were kind of reversed from the stereotypical roles. She doesn't really want to talk much, and I overtalk. I talk too much, too fast, too loud, too intensely, and that could, when we first started having arguments within our marriage, it was I was way too intense about how I would pursue something without thinking hey, how is she receiving this? How does she need time to process this stuff? And so we've grown in that over 9 years, probably. Like we just argue way more effectively. We know that we know that we're going to be there at the end of the day.
Right.
Like it's going to get resolved. We're going to figure out a path out of this. So what steps do we need to take to get there? And that's mostly compromise from both of our, she doesn't want to talk as much. So she's learning still, how much to give to make sure that feel like I'm heard and make sure I feel like my point's being made and at least understood if it's not, something to agree with. And then I'm learning to kind of hold back a little bit, like there's a little bit of that, she's fills in all the blind spots in me and I and her, hopefully, maybe, we'll see. But hopefully that's the goal, is that we sort of see from that different perspective and give the other an understanding of what they're missing.
And I think that's really important. I read some research just a couple weeks ago from the Gottman Institute. And if you're not familiar with Dr. John Gottman, he is the leading marriage researcher in the world. He's fantastic. Not necessarily from a Christian perspective, but I think when I read his writings, I see biblical principles in everything he writes. So he's really solid. But and I think this would be a shocking statistic to a lot of people at first, but then when they think about it, I think they would agree. But they say that 70% of marital conflict is unresolvable.
Is unresolvable?
Yeah.
Unresolvable. 70% of it you're never going to find the end answer for, because a lot of it is what we would call perpetual problems, problems that just don't go away because it's maybe tied to your personality. What you were talking about, just for a second, just a second ago, John, was tied to personalities and how you're wired.
Right.
And I would say that in your marriage, you're probably always going to talk more than Olivia, and Lydia's always going to listen more than you.
That's true.
And there's and what Bridget was talking about there as well. I mean, we all happen to have the same perspective on laundry, but but that's not necessarily a gender specific thing, because I know guys, particularly if they've been in the military or something like that, they're not going to leave anything out. They're neat, they're orderly. For me, it is my process about why I would leave clothes out is exactly what you guys spelled out. There's kind of a plan here. There's a thought process behind it. There's a reason why things were where they were. And but that's also how I'm wired. I don't just do that with laundry. I do that with everything that I do, and whenever you have in a marriage somebody that's not wired like you are, it will lead to conflict. And I think probably one of those big expectations that a lot of people have is that when we get married, we're never going to have any conflict. We're never going to have any problems. And that if we do, that's a bad thing. But what I would say to that is, if you never have any conflict in your marriage, one of you is not necessary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, whenever you talk about me making you better, you make me better. Part of the reason why we get better is because of the conflict.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And so there's a strength, there's a powerful thing about being able to engage in the conflict, not fighting and yelling at each other and degrading one another. That's sinful and wrong, and we need to get away from that kind of thing. But being willing to express your idea and do it in a loving way that gets you somewhere, gets you down the road. I every once in a while, pretty much every time we do a marriage series, and if you're one of the people that said this to me, I love you, and I love you, but they'll always say, well, we never have any problems. It's kind of like it's kind of like that really, really wealthy kid who brags about how much of success they are in business. Well, you didn't do anything to get that success,
right.
And I'm not, that's an overstatement on my part there for them, But what I would say is, when you've gone through something, it builds you.
Yeah.
It builds you, it builds your relationship. The absence of conflict doesn't mean that your relationship was better. It probably means someone's afraid to speak up.
Right.
Yeah.
It means someone's afraid to disagree, or someone's afraid to have a different opinion. Good night. Every time we go out to eat, it's, where do you want to eat? Well, I don't care. And then you list off another restaurant. Oh, I don't want to go there. Well, you do care. You just don't want to say, And I think that's one of the things that if we have a what I would list as a number one strength of our marriage is that we fight well. We disagree well. We're not calling each other names and trying to be hurtful to each other.
Right.
But when there's an issue, we deal with it and we talk it out and then it's resolved and we're better. We have a deeper understanding of each other. And I think it's vital.
If it's not resolved, you're at least reconciled. There's no, and we were in at C3 conference last week, and I went to an app session called Living in Rhythm, and it was about marriage and family as it relates to ministry and stuff. And he was talking about that statistic: 70% of marital issues are left unresolved. But when the goal is just resolution and not reconciliation, I can understand an issue, but still not like it and still be mad about it. Reconciliation and the coming together of the two to reunite, to remind ourselves, hey, we are one and we're in this together. Sure. That is even bigger than resolving it. One of the quotes from that session was, it helps you to be with your spouse. They were talking about how, the kind of the idea of a soulmate or whatever, and how it's like, no, you're probably not with the most ideal person or whatever, but you're with your spouse because it makes you better, and vice versa, hopefully. And the goal isn't to be the right spouse; it's to become the right spouse. It's not, the goal isn't to be that right now. It's kind of like sanctification. We're all working toward this perfection in Christ. And if the marriage, if marriage on earth is a reflection of the church, then we're all working toward that in marriage. It's like a little version of that.
It's exactly like sanctification. That's why for, over 1,000 years, the church has considered marriage to be a sacrament. Just like the way we look at communion, a physical means of knowing our, infinite God. There's something in marriage about the two becoming one, and not just in the moment of that ceremony, but over the course of a lifetime.
Sure.
That it does transform us, and it should. But that's good.
I think one of the things that we have to do as the church is to just be more real about marriage. I think people look at couples who go to church and they think that they have it all together and that they don't go through things. And I think people inside the church pretend like they got it all together and they're never going through anything, right? Like every Sunday you come in and somebody, hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh man, God is good, right? Oh, I know God is good, but how are you doing? Kind of thing, right?
It's different.
And that's why I always, when speaking on the topic of marriage, I always try to be open and candid, because I want people to know that even couples inside the church and ministry that counsel people, that mentor people, that do weddings, we still have issues.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Kelly said that 70% of conflicts are unresolvable, I think is what you said, but it doesn't mean that they're uncompromisable.
Yeah. That's right.
Right? I think that's really what marriage is about, is I know how I am made. She knows how she is made. Let's find some place in the middle to where we can make this thing go in the clothes or partway in the hamper or whatever that is.
The longer that you're together, I feel like it starts to kind of flip, where she knows me better than I know myself.
Sure.
I know her better than she knows herself. And if we can learn to have that trust in, like, okay, yeah, there's probably, even if you're coming at it the wrong way, or I'm coming at it the wrong way, which is usually the case, then if I can step outside of that selfishness and outside of that I gotta be right mentality, and that outside of that, whatever the frustration or whatever it is, and we can understand, like, hey, we've been down this road before. Whatever fight you're having now is not your first fight. It's not going to be your last. So you probably have an understanding of where this stuff typically leads. And if we can understand where to compromise, if we can understand where to give because we trust and ultimately love the person that we're with, then it frees that up for me to not have to be right about everything, and for me to not have to, to fix every issue, or to have to be the one who, what's the thing? Like, you guys are having an argument or whatever, and you kind of are waiting for that moment where you can be like, told you so,
right.
Told you
Googling
I was right,
something down below your
like you were saying, like, told you so.
Who would do that?
You never say that part. Who does that? That's so weird.
That is so weird. You need help if you do that. I'm just saying, you need help.
But I think it's a really important aspect of marriage to understand that the longer that you're with the person, if you're giving in your marriage who you are, then they know you better than you even know yourself. That's the whole point.
Isn't it cool though in marriage when you find something about your spouse that they're really good at that maybe you hadn't seen before,
Right.
and you're like, man, I'm not good at that, but they are. My life just got a lot easier, right? like delegation is a good thing, especially if it's to someone that's better at it than you are.
Amen.
And that's why God brought people together, is so that the strengths from this person and the weaknesses from this person can be put together, and it creates a better person.
Yeah.
Not two people, but a better person, because I mean, that's what you are as a marriage. You're one.
Oh yeah.
And so God intends for us to use each other's strengths and to view our weaknesses and say, hey, you know what? Admit I'm not very good at this.
Yeah.
But you are.
Right.
Let's do this together.
And to even just be open to that idea is such a huge step. I think that was in my, nope, not that one. I can't find it.
I think you can't have very much.
Go for it. I'll come back to it.
I don't think you can have very much pride.
Oh yeah.
You have to be humble.
Humility.
In marriage.
Yeah.
Because it takes a big person to be able to say, you know what, I'm not better at that. You are. And I've always wanted to be a rock star, and it's obviously not happening for me. But
Yet. Right.
yeah. But when I even realized with myself, like, no, I'm really gifted with kids. That's where I need to be. I could be on stage. It's not where God needs me to be. And being okay with that. So it's kind of like the same thing in your marriage. Like, no, it's really okay that he's better at that. You know, I've always teased them, you're going to be better with the kids when they're teenagers, because you know how to talk to them. You know how to communicate on that level. And I just want to be like, well, let's sing a song or something, you know? You know, and so it's humility that has to be able to say to your spouse, you are amazing at that. And I'm going to be okay to take a back seat, even if it's something that maybe I want to be good at.
But it's also, I think, humility. And sometimes, I don't want to chase a rabbit down the wrong path, but I think sometimes humility, what we call humility, might just be selfishness. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're just better at that than me. Mm. Well, no, you're just taking advantage of her.
So she's better at doing the dishes, so I'll just let her do the dishes. Is that what you're saying? Or?
No.
Okay.
Well, you know the story on that.
I'm nervous. Do I?
Here we go.
Here we go.
I'm going to sip on my Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just that I wouldn't do this. Just when I tried to do them, you would tell me how I did it wrong.
Right.
And so I felt like I couldn't do anything right. So it wasn't that I wasn't willing. Mm-hmm. I would walk away, because if I can't do it well enough or right enough, mm-hmm. why try? Mm-hmm. You know, and that wasn't necessarily laziness, but I do think that sometimes it does come out where we will allow our spouse to do, well, you're better at disciplining the children than me.
You kind of pass the buck in that way.
Women do 90% of the discipline in the home. Dads, we need to pick it up. Sure. Because our kids need to see that we're on the same page.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I kind of, most of the time whenever I talk about this stuff, I kind of put it back on the man, because if we are to bear the mantle of the leader of the household, then I think we need to take more responsibility. Mm-hmm. But true humility would say, truly, you are better. I think true humility would say, I'm better at this than you. Let me serve you in this way. Mm-hmm. Which, that may not sound like humility, but true humility admits what it is and doesn't deny itself at the same time. Yeah. You know, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Mm-hmm. And if you have a gift, if you have a real special shaping in some way, you need to use that. God gave that gift to you for a reason, and to serve your family is mm-hmm. probably the number one reason. That's where it starts. I believe all transformative ministry really starts in the home. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a big part of this. But I think you have to have true humility to get there, and seeing that express itself in marriage is a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm.
My wife came to me one time and said, I need you to help discipline the kids more. Right. And my initial and gut instinct and reaction was, well, I'm not at home as much as you are. I'm not at home as much as you are. I'm working X amount of hours through the week and taking care of all of these things. So you need to do that. right? And so in that, now I tell everybody, my wife is great at disciplining our kids. I mean, there is no one around me that can discipline kids better than my wife can. Right. I mean, if they get out of line, they will get beat. And I don't care to say that on this podcast.
Discipline.
Discipline. Sorry. No, I mean beat. They know that she will follow through with whatever she says. Yep. And however, I think that there are times where I take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And what happens through that is, yes, she is good at it. She is with the kids probably more than when I am with the kids. However, it's not fair for her to be the only parent that is bringing discipline to the kids.
Yeah.
Because then that skews their view to their parents. Well, I have one parent that will whip me and then one parent that doesn't, right? So I have tried to do more on the discipline side. And I got to say, there is no better time that I have found to connect with a kid than through discipline. Mm-hmm. The point of discipline is not to embarrass a kid.
Right.
It's not to do it in front of everyone else. Mm-hmm. If it has to be done then do it then. But the point of discipline is to correct what they do wrong. Mm-hmm. And so something that I always try to do is when we are disciplined or I am disciplining a kid is they get a spanking, but then we sit down and we talk about why there was a spanking. And that, it's not our desire to whip the kid. It's not our desire to hurt them. It's not our desire to cause a scene or anything like that, but we just don't want them to make that mistake again.
Right.
And through that, man, there's something that really gets at me is when I see kids that are disrespectful to their parents because of a lack of discipline.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And a lot of that is because dads are just taking advantage of moms being with the kids more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they won't step into that role. And so you see some dads that say, if I count to 3, you're going to get it when I count to 3. And they count to 3, and then they count to 10, and then they count to 20. The kid can count great, but he never gets whooped. Right.
Right.
And that kid is disrespectful. The Bible is there for a reason. When it says to spare the rod and spoil the child, I'm not saying that every parent should go out and to whoop kids and this and that.
Or that every correction has to take that form.
That's exactly right. But discipline is important.
It is.
And that is part of marriage. If you have kids, it should be a shared part of marriage.
Well, I think part of, because ours is the same thing. Bridget's with the kids most of the time. But I think part of being in that's discipline role is to be that support. Oh, mom said no. The answer is no.
Yeah.
Rather than allowing them to kind of get in between you.
Our kids
to play you. Yeah.
Man, isn't it amazing?
Any chance they get.
Our 3-year-old can play you.
Yeah.
They're awesome at it. We had a thing, kind of like what you're talking about. My kids are saying, "Dad's the fun parent," and when they first started saying that, I was like, "I got to fix that."
I'm not fun.
I am not
Come
fun.
here and get your whooping.
But what I realized was there's a little bit of that going on. Mom would say something, and so they'd bring it to me, and I would say, "Yeah, I don't, sure, why not?" And it changed because we hadn't had a chance to talk about the issue yet, but it changed now. Now it's changed in like, what did your mom say? And so I asked them, and then I verify with her. It's taken more time, but now I've been working on trying to because she needs to know that she has my support. My kids need to know that she has my support.
That's right.
And that can come out in a lot of different ways.
Well, and that spare the rod, like that rod is a shepherd's rod to guide them. That's not just, a lot of people take that out of context and it's like, oh, this is just kind of free range to discipline in whatever way. I think that's important too, to find the right way to discipline your children, but it is to guide them, to show them what is real. We did a thing when we were in Texas. We probably need to bring that back. When we lived in Texas and I worked in an office building, when we first moved back, I was working at home, so we didn't have to do that as much. But probably an hour or so before I came home, she would text me and give me a rundown of what was going on. So I could step into the situations, and my kids were just blindsided, like, I know what you did. You know? But it really helped us get on the same page, because there was that thing, and it's a thing that we're running into now, where the kids are like, I love mommy this much and I love daddy this much, based on the fact that I'm not stepping in and supporting her in the way that I need to. And we're learning how to kind of adjust and get there again. But there was a time where they knew when I came home what to expect. They knew I knew every single thing that they did that they weren't supposed to do, and they knew what kind of discipline they were going to get. It was super helpful.
It's not just about the kids.
Yeah.
It's about how I honor her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because really, I mean, your most intimate connections are going to be with your spouse and with your children, because you spend so much time with each other. That's just a given. But how dishonoring is it of me to her if I just go against what she's saying, what she's teaching, the example she's given?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a challenge.
And it's a hard habit to break too. There's a lot of ignorance in that.
It takes ownership. You've got to see it yourself and own it.
Sure.
Well, and I think a hard part of that too is when you don't agree on the same discipline for your child. Because I think all 6 of us could probably say our own experience as a child. We all were raised probably a little bit differently, maybe more spanking, maybe less, maybe, you just don't know. But so sometimes we've had to go behind closed doors. Like he may have given a punishment and I'm like, I totally disagree with that. But in front of the kids, I'm like, that's your punishment. Yeah. And then we might go talk about it. And I'm like, I might be a little, or the last time they did that, I gave them this punishment. But they don't see us disagree about that punishment. Yeah. And I think the best thing you can do for your marriage, especially with your kids, is provide a united front, regardless, and go later and talk about it. And you can always renege and say, hey, we decided that this is now your punishment. Yeah. But you don't want them to see,
somebody stepping over the other.
I also think it's kind of important, and we've kind of joked a little bit about spanking a lot in the conversation, but this is a parenting discussion, not a marriage one anymore, I guess. But I really think this is a huge thing that I want to make sure whoever just got offended that we talked about spanking hears. I don't think anybody here uses that as the only means of discipline for their kids. There was a time when that's the way it was. If that's the only tool that you have in the toolbox, you need to get more tools. If the only tool that you have is a hammer, then every problem becomes a nail, and you just beat it to death. And that's a terrible thing, and a lot of people have taken that too far. But I think that's one of the things that I think there's a lot of conflict within families. Well, how do you discipline, particularly blended families? Right. How do you discipline these kids, and should you discipline these kids? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But you have to be on the same page to do that. You got to talk. You have communication.
And I think every kid is different as well.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
What may work for our 4-year-old is not going to work for our almost 12-year-old.
Yep.
And you have to get what matters to them. Yeah. Taking away the 11-year-old's phone and no Fortnite.
Yeah.
They
would beg for a spanking. Please, just spank me.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that we came up with a long time ago is when it comes to kids asking if they could do something or get something or whatever that is, and if we give them the answer, they know that they are to not go ask the other parent. Mm-hmm. If they do, they're in deep trouble, right? So we may talk about it later, like you said, Bridget, and discuss what our choice was or whatever the answer is. But the only time that they are to go ask the other one is if I say, well, go ask your mom. Yep. Or if she says, well, go ask your dad. But if I give them an answer and they turn around and they run to Cori and exactly. Can I do this, Mom? Yeah. And she finds out that I already given the answer.
There's a problem.
That's a surefire way to not get to do whatever you were just asking.
Exactly.
Well, and the unification that comes through parenting, it's such if you let it be, it's so strengthening and so empowering and so good for your marriage, because it's another situation where you have to lean on each other. Mm-hmm. You have to do this together.
That's right.
And it's one of those things where you can't be married, for your children, but you can learn from that and you can do that. So whenever they're out, you have a stronger marriage because
Yeah.
of it. You know what I mean? Right. And it's one of those, like, we try to do what is it in James, count it all joy. You know, and we have 3 little ongoing trials running around that we're dealing with. Right. And we just try to look at each other sometimes and just enjoy just the fact that they're there now causing all this trouble, and one day very soon they're not going to be, and it's just going to be us. And what does our marriage look like because of the influence of our kids? You know what I mean? Good. That's a big deal. But we're getting pretty close to time, so I think maybe we can talk about a couple more things. There's one thing I really want to talk about. Criticism in marriage. That's a fun one. This came out of that app session too. I just thought it'd be fun to talk about. Learning to effectively complain. Probably a pretty good key to a successful or a happy marriage is learning to understand and how to best criticize. That might even be the wrong word, but learning to effectively complain, I think, is a big deal. So any thoughts on how to do that in marriage?
There is a tool through Prepare and Enrich, and if you've never heard of it, get with your local pastor. If you're listening to
this local pastor, we'll be happy to talk.
Here's one. Yeah, exactly. So there is a tool that has helped us out, right? Because when you are criticizing, it's all about timing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if the other person is not ready to hear what that criticism is, they're not going to take it as constructive criticism.
Timing and how you present.
Sure.
Presentation.
Well, there is a tool through Prepare and Enrich where you take could be one night a week or whatever it is, and you sit down and you say one thing that you really liked about today and one thing that you would like to change in your marriage about today. And through that context, when you're sitting down, and she may say something like, and this is literally one of the ones that she said is, I wish that when you were home, you weren't spending as much time on your phone and more time with your family, right? And so outside of that context, I probably would have got very defensive. Like, my job requires me to be on my phone. I need to contact these people. I got to do all this stuff. But when we are taking time to sit down and talk about it, and she says that, I was like, absolutely. Yeah. You know, much more receptive to what they're saying because you have that context, you have the time, the tone is coming off right. And so you can receive criticism.
So we're in the middle of an argument. All you're doing is building a defense for what you're doing. So whenever something like that comes at you, the only thing you have is defense to throw back at it. And if you and this is just a side note on the phone thing. I was reading, I think it was in H3 Leadership. Carlos Whitaker had a little note on the tail of one chapter.
Great book.
And it is a great book. And he said that they have a freedom box in the entryway when they come home, and they drop their phones in the freedom box until bedtime. And that was just their way. And I'm not saying that's a prescription to marriages to do that. We don't do that. But we might, there might be a time where we realize that that's a need. But it's just fine, understanding that, how much is too much of whatever a phone or whatever distractions you have, and understanding that we have to come together, maybe not while we're arguing about it, but, come afterward and have that discussion and grow together in whatever way and make those decisions together.
Right. I think a huge aspect of bringing critique, let's call it critique, because there's something positive that comes out of that. The criticism almost always ends up negative and tears something down, is being able to be in control of yourself emotionally. Mm-hmm. If you're coming in the middle of your offense, you're going to come in hot. You're coming loaded, ready to go because you're mad or you're offended or you're whatever. You're not even in a way that you could explain it to where it could possibly be constructive. Mm-hmm. And you certainly can't find any options other than stop, right? Right. And so you might be offended at this place. But because you're offended at this place, you're going to go and you're going to offend them at this place. Yeah. And it's going to make the problem so much worse. And so just overall in life, we can't be emotion driven on stuff. Yeah. And if we are, we end up multiplying the problem many, many times over and getting into a place where it's not that problem couldn't be resolved. It's that it won't be because you made it into something a lot bigger than it had to be.
Sure. Right. And find the truth in whatever the critique is and take responsibility for that. Yeah. I was telling you about podcast that I listened to with Bob Goff, author and speaker, and he said that when people critique him, and I'm in no way saying that you should block your wives on Twitter, but this is what he did. So people would criticize him on Twitter about stuff he would post and biblically, inconsistent and, whatever kind of comments they had about the stuff that he would say. And he said that his practice was he would go to that person's profile, he would scan their Twitter feed until he found something he could learn from them who criticized him so intensely, and then he'd block them. As soon as I learn one thing, I block them. I'm not saying block your wives on Twitter or in live, but I'm saying learn from the criticism or the critique that you get.
And I love that guy.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Aaron's actually the guy who turned me on to Bob Goff.
Oh, awesome.
Didn't you call him one day or something?
I did. I read his book. I was in the airport. I called him and was not expecting to get to talk to him. And he answers. He's like, "Hey, this is Bob." And I was like, not like Bob's secretary, but Bob. He's like, "Yeah, no, this is Bob." And he just, I've met him in person, and just wonderful author, great books.
Yeah,
great books.
Love Does and Everybody Always. We couldn't recommend those books more. Not particularly about marriage or anything, but I think that some of those stories in there
pertain to love.
They will. Especially to how you love people, how you love your spouse, for sure. So, any other thoughts on critique or criticism?
I think we covered some of the most important aspects.
I think there's some good things that were said.
I think you need to be able to have it.
Yeah,
sure.
But I think the way you engage in it makes a
exactly.
difference.
Like I said at the start of that, learning to complain well. Not to let it just be a complaint, just thrown out into the ether for whatever, but for it to be very specific and for it to be encouraging and loving and like, hey, this will help us, this will grow us, and this will bring us there a little closer.
And also starting it off with a compliment.
Yeah.
Something you like.
Yeah. There's a lot of times where, like, if we're going on a date, we may, before the date, say, hey, I want you to bring a list of 3 things that you love about our relationship. And then something or, a couple things that you would like to see improve. And so you always start off with the positives first and feeding into them before you bring in,
Yeah. Gratitude. Like, I love you because of this. Our marriage is stronger because of this.
Right.
It's kind of the piggy bank example. When you deposit a lot, then you can take a little bit out. So all the positives are building you up, and then, you take away with the negative, but you're not in the negative because you have so much in there. So you're built up. There's way more positive things about our relationships than negative. And so we can work on those things to continue to get better.
Right.
All right. I think we're at an hour. So any final thoughts? We'll just go around the room here. We'll start with Bridget.
Okay. This is tough because I don't know what a final thought is other than one thing I was going to talk about today was maybe comparison and how that can really destroy your marriage. And one of the most beneficial things that I realize is our relationship is unique to us. Yeah. It's special to us. And when I stop saying, why can't he act more like him? Or I'm not as good as her at doing something, that just tore down what was special about us. There's going to be other marriages that have the market on fun. There's going to be other couples that have the market on whatever it may be, but that's not us. This is us and what makes us special. And we may be the only 2 people that know what is amazing about our relationship, but that's the only 2 people that need to know. And so for me, not comparing our relationship to anybody else has given us confidence or given me confidence in what we have that is unique and special and why God uniquely brought us together.
That's good. That's good.
And for me, I think one of the things that I heard this from somewhere and I can't remember where, but never stop trying to unravel the mystery that is your spouse.
That's good.
The fact of the matter is that God is still shaping and forming her more and more into his likeness every day. And as a part of that, she's continuing to become. And so am I, and so it's studying her. It's taking time to have those conversations, not automatically thinking, I know what you're going to say or I know what you're going to think. And there is a humility that has to be present for that to happen. But it develops an appreciation and a gratitude for who you're married to. And I think that's really, how do marriages end up dead? how do they lose the passion? I think it's that we start taking each other for granted, And so what is that thing, And so it's like a little game that I play with myself about her. It's notice something that's different. Notice something that's special. And I'm not talking about another wrinkle or something like that. I'm talking about just another. Not that she has any, by the way. But what's something that's different? When we first got married, you didn't like onions and you didn't like coffee, and now you like both.
Not together, hopefully.
Okay. Well, it's a unique blend. But I think that's a huge part, and that's one of the things that I want to instill in my sons and my daughters whenever they get married.
Good.
I think what I would like to end this with is just to reiterate to people that no marriage is perfect. And if God compares his relationship to the church, to marital relationships, that it can be the single most effective vehicle to share the gospel with
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a beautiful picture of what God's relationship to the church is. It's not perfect. We're not perfect, but there's a purpose.
Yeah.
And so that's really it. That if you're struggling, you can make it.
Absolutely.
If you are just looking at the flaws of your spouse, you need to start putting some time in on yourself instead of looking at their flaws.
Yeah.
Think about all the things that you could do better.
Yeah.
For me, I would say to not ever feel like you've arrived. I mean, marriage it's constantly a daily thing of getting better. And I talked about our first year of marriage being terrible. And I guess I always looked, when I was younger at couples who had been married, forever. Like, well, they probably don't have any fun anymore or whatever.
Right.
But like the longer that we've been married, going on 13 years, like we've never been happier.
Right.
And it's because we've chosen to keep going, and the conflicts have truly made us stronger and made us closer together. So, no matter where you're at in your marriage, don't give up, keep going and it will get better and better.
Yeah.
That's good.
That is
You're
good.
smoking hot.
Clear the room, guys. We're done here. No, I'm going to kind of tag on to that. I'm going to use our LifePoint's word this year is relentless. And I think be relentless in the pursuit of your spouse.
Yes, that's good.
What you're doing here is just a reflection of what you're going to be, what you're building and what you're doing for the kingdom. And I think that is a really important aspect of marriage. Hey, Olivia. Hey. How's it going? I love my husband. I think that was
John, I think he took the words out of her mouth.
I think so, literally. No, but thank you guys for joining us here on To The Point on YouTube or on the app or listening in your ears on whatever platform you're listening on. We really appreciate it. We'd love if you would review the podcast, if you'd share it with people so we can spread the word. I want to thank Aaron and Cori for joining us today. You guys are awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Love it. But one thing that we forgot to mention last time, podcast@lifepointlebanon.com. If you guys have any questions, comments, critiques, maybe not critiques about your spouse, deal with that separate. But if you have any ideas for us, we would love to hear it. podcast@lifepointlebanon.com, and we will see you next month.
Thank you for listening to the To The Point podcast from LifePoint Church. For more information about LifePoint, visit us on the web at lifepointlebanon.com. Be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast, and be sure to share it with your friends on social media. Thanks for joining us for To The Point.